So Rob is in the US. He's quite a big name in the micro four thirds world, and he has done some similar online sessions, online meetings with other micro four thirds photographers over in the US. So in a similar way, similar to the things that I tend to do, I'm also a journalist who looks at other systems. So which is why I'm very keen on keeping discussions in the frame of reality. You know, micro four thirds can't do everything, and we need to respect that. But at the same time, you know, let's enjoy the things that we can do best. And Rob is, I think, of a similar vein. Rob chooses to use micro four thirds for his own work, but above all, he's interested in helping people enjoy and master photography, no matter what system that they have. But Rob is, in particular, quite good. You know, pretty good at getting the most out of his gear, and I'm sure that he'll be talking about that. And if we have time at the end, if people would like to ask some questions, as usual, that will be one of the things that we'll do. So I'm going to hand over to Rob now. So Rob, if you'd like to share your screen.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that in just a minute. I wanted to just thank everybody for coming in today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, potentially even away from the Wimbledon men's finals. But yeah, I'm very flattered and honored to be here among so many great photographers and this community, because I only recently discovered the e-group this year, and I was, you know, I just loved it. You know, I felt very welcome. I liked all of the feedback and comments and discussions that were going on, and everyone's so helpful, and you know, it just clicked with me. So I wanted to get out as much as I can about this community as well to my viewers. So I've, you know, obviously I've posted the link for this particular session, but also I do bring it up time to time in my live streams and and other videos and people I talk to, you know, in my photo club. But you know, I kind of made a little outline today, what I wanted to kind of try to cover to make it semi-productive and not just be all about me. And that's sort of the my goal is really, you know, if I'm going to spend time and you're going to take time, try to make it as productive as possible. But I do want to give a little heads up, because there's a lot of people curious. These are very common questions I've gotten about me over the years that I've been doing YouTube. And one is I'm relatively new to photography. I mean, it's been 10 years, so I don't know if that's still considered new. It's, you know, because you're always learning in this field. But that's when I got my first real interchangeable lens camera. And when I was in college, you know, 20, 30 years before, I did do a little bit of film photography, but that was it. And then there's this huge gap until about 10 years ago, like 30 years, that I really didn't take many photos. And, you know, I had an event happen in my life that made me decide that I wanted to get into photography. It's very specific, and everyone's reason for getting into photography might be different. It wasn't because I wanted to, you know, I never had that photography bug right before most of my adult life. But you know, I had a couple of dogs that, you know, one lived to be 17 years, and I had her since she was a puppy, and the other one grew up together with her, and she lived to be about 15. And they had passed away right around 2011, 2012, you know, one after the other. And that's when I realized that I didn't have any photos really of them that I liked. You know, they were all like the crappy BlackBerry phones. Remember those? Or, you know, I have a few point and shoots that, you know, of course, those are all crap, especially back in the, you know, mid 2000s. But that's all I did, and I really regretted not having more memories, captured from that, and that's why I got into photography. So I went out 2013 and I bought my first real camera, which happened to be a Sony NEX6, which is, similar to the A6000 series. But that's really why I got into photography, and that's also why I started my YouTube channel, even though there's really hardly any videos about my dogs on YouTube. But uh, my name is that's kind of like my stage name, or AKA, otherwise known as Rob Trek. But my real name's Rob Rogers. But I named my channel Rob Trek, and a lot of people assume that's because I'm a Star Trek fan. But it's actually uh, the word Trek, and I am a Star Trek fan, but the word Trek actually means to travel, right? Is another synonym for that. And what I wanted to do was, now that I was doing photography, because I opened the YouTube channel back in 2016. I wanted to record video now of me and my dog going out on camping and hiking and things like that. So we did a lot of that, uh, in 2014 and 15. And I said, I should document this on video as well. So I started that channel, Rob Trek, or I just opened the account. So it'd just be my travels with my dog. And unfortunately, he passed away right in 2016 when I opened up the YouTube channel. So I decided that, and right around 2016 is when I got into Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras. And as I was learning how to use it, I decided to just say, okay, these are great little cameras. Let me make a little video about it, because it's so different from, I was shooting a Nikon D750 at the time, regular old DSLR. So I decided to just make a video about how to use this camera, right? And that's the whole story, my beginnings on YouTube and why I got into photography. And it's all because, of my dogs, really, because I don't have a wife and kids and all that. I just have my girl dogs. But uh I kind of elevated, in terms of photography itself, the gear, I transitioned from originally starting with a Sony NEX. And then a friend of mine, he used a Nikon D100 or something. And I said, optical viewfinder. I was kind of nerdy back then, so I wanted to get the EVF and all of the highest tech. So that's why I bought Sony. Uh, but he was using a DSLR with an optical viewfinder, and I tried it. And I said, actually, I kind of like this better, you know? So that's why I switched to Nikon, is I like the optical viewfinder better. For many years, up until 26, well, not many, like 3 years, I shot Nikon D7100. I dropped and broke it, so I bought a D750 to replace it. And and it was, and then of course, gas comes in, and I just started buying all kinds of lenses and gear and everything related to that. And then, like I said, I wanted to do some hiking and camping and everything. I did a lot of that back then with my dog. And it got to where I was bringing a 30-liter backpack, to carry all of my Nikon gear. I had a 150 to 600 Tamron. And of course, I had the Sigma art lenses, and those things are all like this huge, right? The 50 millimeter, super heavy, 600, 800 grams per lens, the 24 to 105. And so I went to the camera store where I bought all my Nikon stuff. And I said, I need to get a small camera, something better than my little Canon S100 point and shoot, right? Something small with an interchangeable lens, because I kind of like that aspect of it. And so she showed me a Fuji X-T10 and the EM10 Mark II. And they were both priced about the same, give or take. And I put them side by side, and she was trying to explain to me the benefits of each, right? And at the time, it was like, and I knew nothing about micro four thirds. I never even, I was not into sensors or, uh, all of the specs and everything. I shot Nikon because I like the optical viewfinder, and the fact that I upgraded to a full frame was because I started to do work professionally, and I'll talk about that next. But so she showed me the EM10 and a Fuji, and I seriously, it was like a coin cost for me at that point. I could have got either one, and that's the system I'd be with. So I could be a big time Fuji user right now. But I picked the Olympus EM10 Mark II uh, mainly because I like the aesthetics of it, how it looked, and it was just a fraction smaller than the XT10, but I just liked how it looked better. I said, this is a more handsome camera, and I like the dials on it because it had real dials on the top and bottom, whereas the Fuji XT10 had those little plastic wheels, and I was like, well, I like how this looks better and it feels better. And then after shooting with it, and then this was like in August, I think, of 2016. After shooting with it, because you get something new, you want to take it out, you have a new toy. I was so impressed with the image quality. I was like, for this tiny little sensor, I was expecting like compact camera type, results. But for this tiny little camera, I'm getting results that are just as good as my full frame D750 for a quarter of the size and weight. Now, of course, there were some compromises, right? I did notice, that just straight out of camera images weren't as good as, the Nikon, but for the kind of things I was shooting, my intent, go hiking and camping and stuff like that, I was like, this is way more than good enough. And I said, you know what? This is so good. Let me try and take it onto a photo job. And I was shooting, commercial real estate properties, businesses and things at the time. So I took it. I said, I'm going to try it. And I'll be damned if it wasn't just as good. The client had no idea, right? They don't care what camera I use. And the final results were equally as good for the kind of shooting that I did with that camera, that kind of work, that I said, you know what? I don't need to bring this humongous, pack of gear and lenses and heavy gear. I can just kind of just get a little messenger bag, put a couple lenses in there and a flash, and I'm good to go. So right now when I go out, it's all the flash gear, my 8200 and my V1 and stuff that I use actually weighs more than the gear that I take anymore, the gimbal. But the camera system itself, I now use the OM1 for my professional work, but I used the EM10 for a couple of years to do my professional work. And eventually the Nikon D750 and all that gear just started collecting dust. And I found myself never wanting to take that gear out because it was noticeably heavier, and people say, what's wrong with you? It only weighs this much. You can't lift, 1 pound or 2 pounds. That's not the point. The point is, being able to take a much smaller system in a messenger bag and go everywhere. I didn't feel like there was any need to bring heavier gear with me if it wasn't giving me any advantage. And the other big advantage, and this is what switched me off of going from optical viewfinders, was because of my professional work, having that live view really made a big difference in helping me to compose the shots. Because you can put the grid lines on, and in real estate architectural photography, your lines have got to be straight, right? If you can get your lines straight, you can be a real estate photographer, basically. But that's that's kind of what got me switched back to using the electronic viewfinder and the live view, was because of my professional work. And then once I got used to it, I used it for everything in my personal work and personal photography and stuff. And and that's based on my transition. Was I found, all the advantage of the size and weight of the micro four thirds systems, and the trade-off for image quality were minimal or non-existent for the kind of professional work that I did. And for my personal stuff, it didn't really matter. It was still more than good enough. So that's how I got into it, and as I was, and it was so different from a Nikon gear. I said there's probably a lot of people switching from other systems, mirrored DSLR systems to mirrorless, particularly Olympus. Uh, they may be a little confused like I was when they started using it because of the menu system and all of the features in it. And because I didn't have any dog to go with me hiking and camping, I said, let me just make some videos about how to use this camera. And so we're circling back to how I got started on YouTube. But that was my takeaway was, the Micro Four Thirds system is that the compromises are minimal for the advantages that I was looking for in size and weight. And that's why it was only 30 days later, in September of 2016, that I bought the PEN F that had just come out, and it turns out to be my favorite camera of all time, because the EM10 Mark II at the time, it was on sale. I got the 40 to 150 kit lens and the 14 to 42 for like $600, right? And I said, and they had the PEN F on the shelf, and I was like, they want $1,200 for that. I was like, holy smokes, I'm not going to spend that much for a little pocket camera that I want to go out hiking with. But it was after that like 30-day window of using the EM10, I had no hesitation buying the PEN F and going full into Micro Four Thirds, because I didn't see really the compromise on image quality was minimal or non-existent for everything that I did. Now, if I was shooting, in caves and low light all the time, yeah, maybe I would have stuck with a full frame camera. But I think for most of us, the Micro Four Thirds, the performance and the image quality you get out of it is way more than enough for just about everything. And then let's see. So that's one of the things I learned, over my short time of being in photography was, when it comes to taking good pictures, and, image quality is much more about your technique and skill set than it is about the gear. The gear doesn't matter as much as the person behind the camera and what you can do with it. And that's partially, again, why I do the YouTube channels, is I wanted to show people that, you can take any camera. I've taken amazing images with my little pocket TG5, right? Because it has a lot of the same customizability as the EM10. And I tried to show people with a basic EM10 camera, you can still get fantastic images. And some of the features I talked about, the live view to help me with composition. The other thing about the Olympus cameras was the customizability of setting up the buttons and dials. That made a tremendous difference in my workflow in the field. And that's another reason I easily switched over to using it professionally, is because I could just dial in. And in the EM10, you could, at the time, the EM10 Mark II, you could program custom modes to your mode dial. So I would set up one set of functions for, my ambient light, to the one of the settings on the mode dial. Then I would set up the second part of the mode dial for the flash type photography that you do in real estate. And then the third one for type of bracketing and HDR. So just being able to quickly change custom modes on the mode dial on EM10 was just a game changer for me. And reassigning buttons to do these different because when I do my architectural type photography, I generally have to do 4 to 12 pictures per room to get the best out of that particular, and then I do a lot of post-processing. So typically I'll take 3 bracketed shots for like an HDR if I have to fall back on that. Then I'll do a flash photography to get the colors and white balance correct. And then I'll do a standard high definition type shot or static shot of just the ambient light in the room for the composition. So for every scene, I do, 2 to 4 different types of shots so that I have a lot to fall back on it, and it's come back to save me a lot. So uh, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got into shooting professionally, because that's relatively new also. Around 2015, 2016, uh, it was actually about 2015, I actually started shooting for money, right? Making money with my photography. And, it was actually through where I worked, my cousin was selling one of his office buildings, and he knew I was getting into photography. And he said, "Rob, can you go take pictures of, my office building over there for the agent?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do that." Uh, so I did that, and they were okay, considering I never done architectural photography before. But they came out okay, and I said, this could be this could be the way to go in photography to make money with it, because the whole time I was doing photography with my little Sonys and Nikons was, I was thinking, oh, get into portrait photography and do these senior portraits, or, I was thinking all these different ways to make money. Because I've always been kind of in business for myself, doing different things. And I said, this architectural thing, this real estate, commercial real estate in particular, could be a way to make some money with this. So I did a little research about, how much they get paid in the area. I did the standard things. And I went to the agent and I said, "Hey, what do you think of those shots I took?" He said, "Oh, they were nice." I said, "Tell you what, I want you to pick 5 properties that you have for sale right now, and I'll do them all for free." Uh, because I need to practice at this. I want to get good at doing this. Uh, so I did 5 properties, no charge, right? Just to learn this craft. And, so there's a lot of things there that I know not everyone can do, right? Like you got to have that first opportunity, which happened to be through a relative, to go take a picture of a property. Uh, but uh, and then having an agent that would be willing to let you into their properties, because most of the office properties are empty and vacant, to trust you. So you have to build up a lot of trust and stuff first and have some rapport. But the trade-off was he was getting free pictures, right? So uh so I got good. And I'll tell you, if you're interested in getting into this kind of photography, that's really a great way to get started. Is um try to, if you know anybody selling their property for sale, whether it's a residential, an office, or whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be real estate. It could be they sell something. But that's a great way, is to, you know, find somebody that that you can do pictures for them to give to somebody that might actually pay for them eventually. And then you can approach that person, now that you have that link, is say, "Hey, I know you're into you need photos for your business, for your clients. I'll do so many for free because I need to get good," right? So there's really no downside if the person knows you already. So you do need a little bit of rapport with the person that you get connected with. But that's how I got started. And and then you also kind of tease them a little bit that going forward, and it's true to this day, you give them a steep discount on any photography that you do for them. And then they'll give you referrals on the side, which, if your work is good, you'll get referrals from that agent to other agents that are going to be willing to pay. And then with each new agent, you raise your price a little bit back to what you should be getting paid, right? Because I still don't get paid what I should from this first guy that still uses me uh, for his photography, for his business, taking pictures of his properties. I still charge him about half what I charge people he's referred me to. But in any case, that's what I learned there. And it's kind of expanding now into doing residential properties, which I'm not a big fan on. Because the difference between saying doing an office building, office space versus say residential is you can have two things, right? Each one is say 5,000 square feet. I don't know what that converts to in, I don't know even know how you measure real estate in the UK or other places with the metric system, but 5,000 square feet is typically like a probably a 5 or 6 bedroom home with, 4 bathrooms and huge living areas, just to give you some idea. Or a typical office space, with a good size office space that could fit, 40 or 50 people is about 5,000 square feet. And the main difference is office spaces are usually empty. Time to time, they are working businesses, but usually people are selling their office space because they're out of business or moved to a different location. They're usually empty, and color, white balance, and image quality is not quite as critical, because anybody that goes into an office space is usually going to strip the place out and refit it to their use, right? The exceptions being like medical offices. Typically, you do need to be a little more precise with those because another doctor will be going in there. But if it's a generic space, you don't have to be so critical about getting the right composition and angles and everything. You just have to get your lines straight and the lighting correct, and making sure that you got the color on the wall exactly right when you look at the final image is not that critical. So that's why I like doing commercial, because the spaces are empty. You don't have to be, you can make mistakes and get away with it. It's not quite as critical. And you can do them fast. If it's a big open space, 5,000 square feet of just cubicles, you can take like 4 shots of that space and you're done, really, and then you pad that with, the lobby, the bathrooms, whatever. And you still end up delivering like 15 to 20 pictures for a commercial space, but you charge more for that. So it's less work, less headaches, and you can charge more for commercial property. For residential property, the technical side, the problems are the composition is very important. People need to see the space in a way that gives them as much information as possible. So when you take a picture of the living room, you can't just take a picture of the living room. You have to include, okay, there's a staircase over here. The kitchen is off to this direction. There's a counter over here. There's a fireplace. You need to take a picture to provide as much information as possible. So the composition is very, very important. You don't want to just take a picture of 2 blank walls and the floor. You need to make sure you include all the information or the selling points of the property in almost every single shot. The other challenge with residential is people paint their houses all different colors inside. You got blue, orange, pink, I mean, just everything. And this causes a lot of problems with white balance. And, so that's why I got into getting good at flash photography, because flash is kind of the equalizer. You have one light source that you can, do your white balance with, and use white cards, whatever you need to do. With office space, it's not quite as critical. The only reason I really needed to use flash in office spaces is because of the balancing the ambient light, or the light coming in through windows, which are very bright, and then typically in the office is very dark black furniture like black leather and things like that. So flash kind of equalizes the ambient lighting from the inside to the outside. You have to do the same thing with residential, but the difference is you got all kinds of color cast. You got these hardwood floors a lot of times that cast off this orange all over the place. And then God forbid, if there's any furniture in the house already, right? Then you got to start dealing with all of the weird colors and ambient lighting off of the furniture that, you know, and all these colors have to be as accurate as possible. Because you don't want to deliver an image of a pink room, but it looks red, right? It has to be pink. Or you have different shades of green, different shades of blue. The colors have to be exactly right. So residential photography is much more difficult. And in a 5,000 square foot space, you're going to end up delivering 35, 40, 50 pictures because you have 5 to 7 bedrooms, you got 4 bathrooms, you got the kitchen, you got a dinette, you got a dining room, you got the living room, you got a family room. You know what, you see where I'm going with this? You have a lot of smaller rooms in that same space, and you're dealing with this freaking, you know, color casting issues in every single room. And then you have to think about the information. So residential, in my opinion, is 10 times harder, and it's much more competitive because there's thousands of residential real estate photographers out there. So being competitive, it's hard to charge more, particularly with new clients. If somebody doesn't really know me, maybe I'm just a referral, you know, they know what they are paying their other photographer, right? If they have one, versus what I'm going to charge. So I have to kind of temper my pricing a little bit for residential, even though it's much harder work, just because of the competition. Because there's photographers out there. I ran into one agent that she uses me time to time when it's convenient, but she doesn't use me for probably 80% of her properties because her current photographer does excellent work, right? And he charges less than I do. And there's probably, you know, some history with them in terms of their business relationship as well, which may play some role into it. But I guarantee you, if I was a better photographer and charging less, I'd probably steal a lot of their business, you know, with most agents. I don't know if that would work with her because, like I said, she may have a good rapport with that particular agent or that particular photographer. But yeah, he's doing great work and charging less. I mean, I would say he's actually even a better real estate photographer than I am in terms of the kind of quality output that he gives, especially for the pricing. But that's kind of what I do professionally, and and you know, some of the things I'm getting into professionally, what I'm adding is there's a lot of AI stuff out there now that I'm starting to take advantage of, like virtual staging, where I can stage properties. Let me just show you a quick screen of that. And mind you, I'm still using all Micro Four Thirds gear now. Let me see, share screen.
Just while you're doing
Yeah,
that, I have to say, I'm not aware of any other Micro Four Thirds photographer who's doing real estate photography. You are unique in that.
really. Yeah. Well, one of the challenges of doing it with Micro Four Thirds is getting a wide enough angle lens, right? I mean, now we have the 7 to 14 2.8, but before that, finding a quality wide angle lens was not easy. What choices did you have, right? The 9 to 18 millimeter kit lens, kind of. You have the 9mm body cap lens. I mean, there just wasn't really a huge plethora of wide angle lenses. And then if you wanted to get tilt shift lenses that, you know, for architectural stuff, that's non-existent. Even I think to this day, it's very difficult to find a tilt or shift lens for architecture. It's not needed so much now because we can do that in post. But I think that's why there's not a lot more people using Micro Four Thirds, because they had to buy another system to have access to the lenses and gear that they needed to do the work.
But what I think makes you stand out is that for a system that's not perceived to be particularly suitable for that genre, you're making a success of it.
Yeah, because honestly, you're shooting at base ISO for commercial or for real estate photography. You're shooting at base ISO and bright because you're on a tripod. So you don't need the hand hold to take a picture. So you can shoot at base ISO with longer shutter speeds and higher aperture. So you get, that's the other thing is the depth of field. You know, I can shoot at f5.6 and get all the depth of field I need. And still shoot at base ISO and have reasonable shutter speeds, which is kind of irrelevant on a tripod. You know, and then when you're using flash photography, you're at base ISO. And then of course with HDR, you're always on a tripod, whether you're doing flash or bracketing. And a base ISO, you know, there's no difference in image quality really, as far as the final output, because I actually deliver 2 megapixel images, just 1980 by 1020 images to my clients. That's all they require to distribute those photos through their MLS system or, you know, marketing distribution online for the web. I'm going to try and share this screen. I guess what's showing now is the flicker, right?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, so let me go over to this. This is one I did in May. So if any of you guys are watching my YouTube channel and I don't post anything for like a month, it's because I'm doing jobs like this, right? But this is one that I did. But I wanted to show you the virtual reality. So let's take this image here, for example. It's just an empty library. And this is about a 5,000 square foot home, just for reference. So there's that. And then this is the virtual staging I did using, you know, the AI type tools. I use one called Apply Design. That's their website. I don't know what the extension is, but the website's Apply Design. And they give you like groups of furniture that match each other together, and then you just pull from that collection so that when you do put things into a room, they all go together. So I don't even have to be an interior designer or have any sense of, you know, how to put things together. It does it for you. Because I know Adobe, they're starting to get into AI where I can say put a sofa or a bed in here, but it's very random. And the next thing you add to the room might not match what you just put there. But with this particular service, they group, you know, it's kind of special made for, you know, people like me. This is another room that was empty, but I just staged virtually. And you can see it does a beautiful job. I love how the AI, you know, casts the lighting onto the furniture from the light sources in the room automatically. So it looks more natural. Because if I were to take away all of the lighting and shadow effects that the AI generates, it would look fake. But this is pretty convincing, I think. You know, here's a kitchen I did. Kitchen was bare empty, but I added, you know, some stuff to it. This is the dining area in living room. Again, this was completely empty. I don't know if I have an empty shot of that. Well, yeah, here's the kitchen, right? Completely empty versus using an AI. There's the living room, but these were all empty rooms. But you get the idea. I lost the button on how to stop sharing. Well, I'll just leave it up. But that gives you the idea of where I'm going into now. I'm a little Johnny come lately to this whole AI thing, but and virtual staging, but now it's really good and it's all packaged. So that's one of the things. You can be like one of those early adapters and get kind of a head start on it, but coming in later, you know, everything's kind of set up and done. So my transition into using these tools is much easier, right? Because it's a little more polished from an end user experience. And then I'm getting into 360 type floor plans and eventually I'll start doing drones. Drones in my area is a little bit tough. But okay, so before I'm running really long here, but what I wanted to just take away from is, for what I do, real estate, architectural type photography, the way to really grow and expand in this business, if you wanted to get into this and make money, and you can do it on the weekends, right? That's how I started, just on the weekends. Just get really good. Get really good at, your photography skill set. And that's why I said earlier that your skill set is much more important than the gear itself, right? Because I could, if a TG5 was wide enough angle, it's only 12 millimeter, right? I could probably do it with a TG5, everything I'm doing. I don't even need, micro four thirds for what I do. I could get away with a point and shoot if they had wide angles, but they can't, they don't normally.
Rob, just to let you know that if you need to get back to the toolbar at the bottom, just move your mouse to the bottom of the screen. I think it'll pop up.
Yeah, right now I just have a sidebar.
If you move the mouse to the bottom of the screen, does it not pop up the toolbar at the bottom?
No, all I have is this.
Okay.
I don't see any. Oh, what's this button? Oh, I see it. It's on my other monitor over here. Okay. I got it. Okay, so if I do stop there. So yeah, get really good and people will come to you. So I got another new client this last week for 2 jobs because they saw my work from the other agents that I do, and they just hired me on the spot to do 2 properties, and they're going to have me do all of their properties going forward and video work. My video skill set's not quite there yet, but they seem to like it. But I have a much higher standard for myself. We're our own worst critics, right? The other thing is consistency, right? So when you get good at it, you have to be very consistent in delivering, and then also be very reliable. If you're going to tell somebody you're going to be there, you need to be there and do it. And then also I like to offer perks every now and then, like doing floor plans is very easy now. And it's the only reason I use the Apple product and iPad. That's the only reason, is because I can do floor plans with it. It has that sort of 3D type camera on it, I guess. I don't know what it's called, but it works. So I had that on because it only takes me about 15-20 minutes to do a floor plan. And sometimes I'll give that away for free as a perk, and people like free stuff. But those are really the things. And then getting started though is just a matter of finding that one person. Okay, so any questions about any of that stuff that I do professionally or anything?
Well, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but some people have already picked up on the fact that you can text messages to the group chat for the meeting, and there are a few questions already there. So,
Oh, okay. Let me pull that up.
Okay.
Is your skill as a photographer, okay, this is from RC. Is your skill as a photographer in anticipating the shot and having the camera ready, or mastering the camera to be able to change and react quickly to any opportunity? It's both. It's both, particularly with wildlife, right? You have to be able to anticipate the shot, and that means being familiar with the behavior of the animal. Like I remember following one bird, and they would always fly from that tree to that tree, and they would always go dive at this one spot or look in this one spot. So after I'm there for a while, sometimes it takes a couple hours, but you start to get a feel for where they're going to move to. And the same thing goes for people, the way people walk. And if you do street photography, you get patterns of people going from, say, a train station to this particular coffee shop. You start to pick up patterns, in life in general. And anticipation. Then, of course, mastering the camera. that camera needs to be like, you don't want to have to think about settings or anything on your camera when you're in the field. It has to be fully automatic, being able to switch from one. And that's why I love the customizability of the Olympus cameras, is because I can adapt it to the way my brain works, so that adjustment to mastering the camera is faster. There's initial, that learning curve, right? But there's that. So it really has to be both. Uh, if you can't master the camera right away, more important, I think, is the anticipating the shot is more important, because you can always put the camera in program mode, and getting the shot is much more important than, anticipating the shot and getting the shot is more important than knowing your gear. But knowing both will, take you to another level.
Robert,
Yes.
I don't know whether you want to come back on that, or has Rob answered your question?
No, that was a fantastic answer. Thank you.
Oh, you're here. Hi. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, great. Let's see. And then if there's time for a second, you have recommended the PL6, Photolab 6 as your choice editor. In your opinion, is it too much emphasis put on post-processing in today's photographers versus the base quality? I don't think so. You always have to get the base shot. That's why I used to post more straight out of camera type shots on my Instagram and Flickr. Now I'm posting more fully edited shots. Sometimes I'll put them side by side. But the base shot is the most important thing, getting the shot right in camera as much as you can. But your camera, if it shoots raw, is designed to be edited in post-processing. If you're a JPEG only shooter, that's the camera doing the editing for you, right? But it's designed to be post-processed. So I think that the tools, like in Photolab 6, the reason I chose it is I think the ultimate final output is the best in terms of the image quality I get, because of the optical corrections, the denoising, and all of that. And I denoise everything. I don't care what the ISO is. It could be base ISO. I denoise it. So yeah, it needs. I don't think there's too much emphasis. I think you can get a little carried away, like I do sometimes. You start layering things and adding fake, stars, and it's okay. Whatever your creative vision is for a particular photograph. But I think, people shouldn't make the mistake of trying to correct bad images, right? If you took a bad shot, and you say, I can recover this in post-processing, that's something you don't want to get into a habit of. You want to always try and get it correct in camera. And then any tweaks you do in post-processing will be minor or secondary to that shot, right? But only to amplify or emphasize what your vision was.
I think you kind of answered Paul Francis's next question. As a professional, do you use JPEG or RAW?
Yeah.
How do you process your images? Paul, are you there? Do you want to add anything to that, or has your question been answered?
Not really. I think Rob's answered the question directly already. So it's just intriguing to see how professionals work with things, because some pros use JPEGs predominantly. It's interesting to see what Rob says about the RAW. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the JPEG type professional shooters, they're usually people that have a very short delivery time, right? They take a picture, they have to deliver it either live through an Ethernet cable plugged into their camera, or, within 24 hours, they have to deliver these images. These are typically your sport event type photographers, right? And shooting JPEG is really their only option. They don't have time to post-process. What I do is I always, I take pictures, take my time, and I have to post-process because I do a lot of layering with HDR and blending with my flash photography and things like that. So every image you see of mine, typically for real estate and architectural, it's typically 4 to 5 images merged together into one. So being on a tripod to be able to align those things up later is very important.
Just putting my point of view in, I think that shooting JPEG is a bit like shooting film. You have a lot more latitude with RAW, but with film, you send the film to the lab and you get your prints back. You can mess around with the negatives if you want to, but most people are just quite happy to have the prints. But that's when you don't have the ambition to get, you know, a lot more out of your images.
Yeah, because people take great photos, but they could be amazing, right? With a little post-processing. But you know, it's all about really what do you want out of your photography? You just want to go out and have some fun and enjoy the experience of photography. That's perfectly fine, right? Or, you know, do you enjoy the post-processing side? Do you like to take your images and say, oh, you know, maybe I can do a little bit more here, add a little bit light. You know, we're just all having fun. It's not, it doesn't matter if you're JPEG only or shoot raw and process. It's all about what do you get out of it personally? Do you enjoy it? That's all that matters.
I think
That's
that's
an
very,
interesting answer.
I think
Sorry,
that's
Ian.
a very, no, that's all right. I think that's a very important point to say. What is photography to one person may be something completely different to what somebody else enjoys. So nobody is going to be right, and nobody's going to be wrong in that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting answer, Rob. Thank you for that. It's the context of what you're working in. If you're working in sports, for example, people want the image, not wanting to mention Wimbledon, but people want the image straight away. Whereas
Yeah.
in your professional sphere, it's a little bit more measured and time isn't quite of the essence, shall we say.
Right, right. It's definitely, yeah. I tell my clients, you know, two business days for delivery because they don't need them that fast normally. That's the other downside to residential property though. Delivery time has to be 24 hours, right? They have to list that property right away. Commercial property, you know, a couple of days here and there, doesn't matter. And you charge more anyway. There's not as much business on the commercial side because, you know, residential homes go for sale, you know, every day, hundreds, thousands at a time in my area. There's thousands of new properties every day. Whereas the commercial side, not so much. But anyway, the other thing is about how do you, from Derek says, how do you protect your images from theft in Scotland where I am? You don't see copyright information on the sites and agents' windows. Yeah, you cannot put any kind of watermarking logo or anything or information about the image here either, right? When it's distributed onto the web for marketing, it has to be clean, just an image. And all of your EXIF data and everything, copyright information is all stripped automatically by all these, you know, distribution sites like MLS. So the way I've run across this a couple times is generally you see the property listed again, particularly residentials, right? About every 2 to 5 years, they get listed again, and you see your images being used by another agent. You know, then you just write that letter an email and just say, you know, if you'd like to use my images, that's fine. You know, it says just have to pay me this license fee, right? Whatever you want to charge for that. So you can kind of keep tabs. You'd have to keep tabs yourself. There's no way to automatically scrape the internet. There might be one day, right? But or maybe there is a way to do it now, but it doesn't happen very often in commercial and real estate because particularly with commercial property, every time the property sells, it's usually been gutted by the previous tenant. So it's totally different than the images that were taken when I took them. If they're going to sell the property again, it's usually been totally redone. So they have to get new pictures again. And in residential property, that doesn't happen quite as often, with the exceptions being if they make an addition to the home or they do some significant remodeling, then, you know, new images are generally required. And or if the condition of the property has changed where it's deteriorated quite a bit. So your images being reused is not quite as big a problem as you would think it would be, although it is still a problem. And if you're keeping track, and you can, because you have a database of addresses, you can go in and look and see if your picture is being used again. But there's no way to protect yourself other than here in the US, you would go to the copyright office and register all your images and you pay a fee. I don't do that because if somebody uses my images, I'm not, it would be rare and I'm not going to go after them anyway, other than maybe to get a potential new client, right? Say, hey, you like my images, if you'd like me to do other properties, let me know, right? You can use those if you want, that kind of thing. And then John Schick says, interesting that you mentioned color. I think this is much underrated quality of different sensors on cameras, often more important than stuff's measured. Some of what's most appealing photos I've taken have been ancient 5-megapixel cameras, which are hopelessly outdated. Yeah. Yeah, I did a comparison. He mentioned about a CCD sensor. When you go to my Flickr page, let me just share one or two more things because I know we're starting to run over. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay, in Flickr, we have the albums here. And in my albums, I have one folder called comparisons. This one, where I'll do shots side by side comparing different things. Right, so here's a bunch of ISO tests, EM1 Mark III versus OM1. But here's one I did. This one. This is a CCD sensor. Like, I think this was the E300, one of the old Olympus E cameras versus, yeah, the E500 versus the M1 Mark II, side by side, right? And then, oops, that's a photo lab comparison. Here's another one. And what I found is basically it's the color science is really the primary difference. Is the older cameras, the color science was a little different than the newer cameras. But once you correct for white balance, the differences are very, very subtle between CCD and CMOS. So like kind of like Robin Wong's video about, he doesn't get it, the difference between CCD and CMOS. I'm leaning towards that. I haven't made a definitive, statement on it, but I'm kind of leaning towards there's not that much difference. Now, you guys may look at this image here and say, wow, there's still a huge difference even after it's corrected for white balance. But to my eyes, it's not that much different. The top image here is definitely warmer than the bottom image, even though I corrected for white balance. So there is a difference, but I think it's more in the color science of the programming of the chip than it is so much the CCD itself. But from time to time, I'll throw things in here. I don't update this quite as much as I like to, but
if I could just say something very briefly, from my point of view, I think that the manufacturers try to adhere to an ISO standard, but what you might get out of the camera from in-camera JPEG processing may be a bit more stylized, but from the raw file, you should be getting similar color response. I've done many color chart comparison tests where you equalize the grays and the rest of the colors usually fall in line.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the raw images are still processed slightly, and there are differences in the what do you call it, the Bayer sensor, color filters on top, but there are plenty of tools to correct for color accuracy. There's you can use those if people make them. I forget what it's called, but you can adjust for color. You can get the colors back to. Oh, I should just pull it up. I have to pull up a raw image. I've done jobs where I forgot to set raw and I had to process all my JPEGs. All right, here's a raw image. DCP profile. Okay. So look for things called DCP profile and research that a little bit, because when you are working with your raw images, you've stripped away a lot of the color science that you see in the JPEGs. And DCP profiles, when you're doing your photo editing on your raw images, will bring those colors back to the Olympus colors, so to speak. You know, Lightroom has like their own profiles where you can set it to natural or vivid and stuff like camera matching. Those are not even close to getting a true DCP profile so that you really do get the Olympus colors back into your raw images. And I've just done, you know, anecdotal type things where I use the color profiles or camera matching profiles provided by, say, Photolab or provided by Lightroom, and compared that to a DCP profile, then compared all of that to an actual JPEG coming from the camera. And Lightroom and Photolab weren't even close. The only way to get the true Olympus colors really is to use Olympus Workspace and export from there using one of the color profiles in Workspace. But if you're going to use anything else, DCP profiles. Okay, I didn't see
Rob,
any other questions.
There was one question which you skipped over, but in the chat I explained that you might not be the best person to answer it, but basically we could turn it around a bit. I mean, the question was, what do you think the chances are of OM-System releasing a PEN Pro and some more 1.4 lenses? Now, you probably can't answer that because you don't represent OM-System, but maybe we can turn it around to, would you like them to do this?
Yeah, and that's both the answer and the question, right? Do people want those things? Then they'll make them, right?
We can hope.
Yeah, we can hope. So I can tell you, if enough people, like I have the luxury of an audience on my channel to talk about the PEN F2 and how much I want one. Jimmy Chang does the same thing. The more people that want something, the more likely they'll make it. That's the best answer, right? Market demand.
Well, how do you think OM-System can justify producing these things? Because the company now has to be very much more tightly focused on the market, and it can't just do things for the sake of doing them anymore, which I think Olympus perhaps used to, certainly in the early days.
Yeah, as well as every camera company, right? There's so many fancy cameras in the past that you just don't see anymore. The only thing that's going to justify it is if sales are not going in the direction that they want with their current marketing plan of wildlife, photography, macro. You know, if their sales are declining and there's not like this, you know, growth in that particular area that they're focusing on, then they might, if they have time, they'll make a switch to something else and introduce a new camera like a PEN F2 for street photography. But I think they're fine the way they're going, because wildlife, you know, travel type photography, tell your story, so to speak, I think is an excellent way for Olympus to go. I mean, they lost a lot of business type people, you know, they lost a lot of street photographers, they lost a lot of portrait photographers, you know, as far as ambassadors go. And you know, they're, because of this direction they're taking. But that's my thought, is I think they might do it. They can justify it if there's enough demand and enough people clamoring for it, but you never know. You know, the whole world could say we want a PEN F2 and then they make it and nobody buys it. You know, it's over my head how all that marketing stuff works. But like I said, we can only hope, right?
Yeah. Hello, Rob. Thank you for answering. It's Stephen here. It was myself who asked the question. I think the premise behind it was that the younger people that I meet, their interest tends to be in kind of black and white and street photography, particularly. And it's kind of an area that Olympus seems to have neglected, but the format suits a small camera. And I kind of think from my own experience that 1.4 lenses are kind of a sweet spot, really. I love the 1.2s, but they are big and they're expensive. But the 1.4 gives you a nice fall off. And
Right.
I think I'm more interested in whether they might make some more 1.4 lenses, just as a personal ask. But
Yeah, I mean,
and
I
also
love the.
I think finally I'm lucky enough to live in Manchester, and we have an independent Leica dealer that's very, very active. And their most successful and profitable camera for a long time has been the Q series camera, which is prohibitively expensive. And I just saw it as kind of a market that they could get into. I wouldn't recommend that they sell it cheaply, but I think they kind of positioned with the format to make a really good alternative to that kind of expensive format that Leica produced, and which has been very successful and very profitable for them. That was all.
I think Pentax monochrome will be an interesting tell if that does well, right? You know, that would be an interesting tell, because that's definitely marketed a very niche camera. It's not cheap, but it's not terribly expensive, and in direct competition with Leica's monochrome. As far as being compact, small, lightweight, Ricoh, I think, has nailed it. The Fuji X100, that's going to be a tough market to get into with those two cameras sitting around and doing well, and all of the hype that you see online for those cameras. You know, to come out with a PEN F, say, or PEN F like, or the PEN series in general, I don't know if Olympus or OM Systems can do it as much as we would want it, because we're already like probably OMD type camera users. I don't know. That would be a tough sell to me. I would be surprised if they went that direction to bring out the PEN series, which was supposed to be sort of the small, light, travel, street type camera. And as far as 1.4 lenses, you know, the Panasonic 25 millimeter 1.4 is on my short list of lenses to get. I think, yeah, the size weight compromise from 1.2 to 1.4 is worth it. And Olympus should definitely, or OM System should definitely crank out some 1.4s.
I was going to mention the Panasonics, because Panasonic have track record there. But discussions like this should raise the issue to the powers that be. We need to do more discussions like this, and to show the product managers what we want. Yeah,
Definitely. It's all about, like you said, what do we want? And that's the answer to what are they going to make? I mean, I love the OM1 for the birding. That I would have never got into birding without it. Particularly buying the 300 f4 Pro lens, which I have stacked up over here. And I think that's kind of where I'll try and end it, because I don't want to take everyone's whole day up, because if you guys ever been on my streams, you know they go for 2-3 hours sometimes. But for my personal stuff, you know, in photography, you know, I've been getting in astrophotography. Let me just do a quick share. You know, something like this, Micro Four Thirds is very well suited for astrophotography. It's a lot of post-processing work, but you know, people always think full frame when they talk about astrophotography, and the truth is, smaller sensors are better because your sensors have to stay on for hours and hours, and they generate a lot less heat than full frame sensors. And heat, it generates a lot of noise. So Micro Four Thirds sensors actually have less noise for deep sky type astrophotography than full frame sensors, and that's why it's kind of the preferred choice, sensor of choice for a lot of astrophotographers, including customized cameras based around Micro Four Thirds sensors. So I've done some of that. And, this is the live composite. So the special features, I sound like a fanboy now, right? But, some of the special features like live comp make doing this kind of photography very, very easy. I just set up the camera on a tripod, turned live comp on, came back 4 hours later, and I got this, right? I didn't have to do any post-processing, nothing. This is pretty much straight out of camera. This is another deep sky. The other thing another feature I really like in the Olympus cameras is the high-res shot mode. And it's very well suited for this kind of photography. There's a lot of moving things here, but that's okay. But this is why I'm not a big fan of super wide angle lenses. Because I'm tempted by like the Panasonic 9mm, the Olympus 9-18, these wide angle lenses from Olympus and Panasonic. But I always go back to just shooting with my 25mm lens and taking 3 shots and stitching them together. And if I combine that with high res, you can get, you can get amazing detail when you take 3 high res shots, stitch them together for doing landscapes and stuff. So, live comp, high res shot, and then of course pro capture for birding. There's a lot to like about this. Was actually the M1X with the 300mm f4 Pro. But the idea being is pro capture really helps you capture shots like this by, pre-buffering all the shots and then just picking the best one. But those are the 3, just very quickly, those were the 3 features I like the most, and the intervalometer, which I use actually for the astrophotography. So that's what I mean. The Olympus cameras are so feature packed with everything in them. It makes it very easy to like the camera, to do all of this different kinds of types of photography. And it's difficult, if not impossible, to find all of this packed into a small system that you can take everywhere, right? And then let's see. I think that was the bulk of it. So I'll take any other questions.
Well,
sorry, I rushed through that part
no,
pretty quickly, but I figured you weren't here to see my pictures, right? Who cares?
No, that's fine, Rob. I think you've introduced yourself, which is great, and we've had some insight into your professional work, and we've had a bit of a peek at your hobby work, and I think you've given us some great inspiration. The bird photography, for example, the osprey. It wasn't osprey. I think, no, or it might have been a fish eagle. I'm not quite sure, but
yeah, it's a bald eagle. But
right. Well,
that's what I mean about my photography. Nobody cares about my pictures, right?
Oh, yes, we do. But excellent looking shots, and for somebody, your journey is fascinating, and hopefully people who want to find out more about you can enjoy your YouTube channel and your website. I think we'll end up for today now. The eagle shot at the end is a good segue for me, because one thing which I'd like to reveal is that I don't have a date for our next video presentation, but I have been in touch with some of our members who are particularly good at bird photography, and I'm proposing that we do a roundtable podcast style discussion on bird photography and getting the most out of your gear to shoot birds. So this will be a roundtable discussion, and in fact, Rob, if you'd like to take part in that, the main issue for me is going to be the challenge of timing it, because we have members in North America, we have members in Australia, and I'd like to involve everyone.
It can't be done.
No, I will try.
I've tried.
But
I've tried.
I will try. But that's my pet project at the moment. So that I'm working on that now, and I've got a lot of enthusiasm from the people I've approached so far. And so we're going to take the online offering to a new stage. And let's hope that all works. So I'd like to thank you very much for spending your Sunday morning entertaining us and giving us some insights. And I'm certainly going to be spending a bit more time looking at your videos in near future. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Did you have a last
Thank
word?
you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for all the educational videos. They're excellent. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
thanks. I try. I try. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Once again, thank you very much. And as soon as I have a date for our next presentation, I'll let you know. So see you on the forum. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Ian. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ian. Goodbye,
Bye.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Thanks, Rob. Bye-bye, Rob.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.